Before we begin this story, I want to share something personal with you. Keanu Reeves inspires me in ways that are difficult to put into words, but I will try. In a world where fame often corrupts and success frequently breeds arrogance, Keanu has remained remarkably human. He has experienced losses that would break most people. He lost his best friend to an overdose. He lost his daughter who was stillborn. He lost the love of his life in a tragic car accident. Yet instead of becoming bitter or closed off, he chose kindness. He chose gentleness. He chose to keep his heart open even when closing it would have been so much easier. What strikes me most about Keanu is not his movies or his talent, though both are extraordinary. It is how he treats people when no cameras are watching. It is the stories of him giving up his seat on the subway for a tired stranger. It is the way he respects personal boundaries and never touches people inappropriately in photographs. It is his quiet generosity, donating millions to cancer research without ever seeking credit or recognition. He once said that grief changes shape, but it never ends, and I believe that understanding of pain is exactly what makes him so compassionate toward others. Keanu teaches us that success does not have to harden us, that loss does not have to define us, that we can carry our wounds and still choose to be soft in a world that often rewards hardness. This story is inspired by that truth. It is about two people finding each other after swimming through separate oceans of grief and discovering that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the bravest thing we can offer another human being. Now let us begin. The story begins. The morning light came through the studio windows differently that day. Alexandra Grant stood very still near her canvas, holding a brush she had not yet dipped in paint, feeling something shift in the air around her that she could not name or explain. It was October in Los Angeles, and the city had that particular quietness that sometimes falls between seasons, when summer has finally released its grip but autumn has not yet fully arrived. Her breath felt slower than usual. Her heartbeat felt louder. The dust particles floating in the sunbeams seemed to hang suspended, as if time itself had decided to pause and wait for something important to happen. She was 53 years old and had spent nearly 3 decades building a career as a visual artist. Her paintings hung in galleries across the world. Critics called her work profound and innovative. Collectors paid extraordinary sums to own pieces that explored the relationship between language and image, between words and the spaces around them. By every external measure, Alexandra Grant had achieved remarkable success. Yet standing alone in her studio that morning, surrounded by canvases and brushes and the smell of oil paint that had once felt like home, she felt hollow in a way that frightened her. The hollowness had been growing for years, slowly and quietly like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. At first she had ignored it, telling herself that all artists go through periods of doubt. Then she had tried to work through it, pushing herself to create more, to exhibit more, to achieve more. But achievement had not filled the emptiness. If anything, each new success had made her more aware of how disconnected she felt from her own work, from other people, from herself. Alexandra set down her brush and walked to the large window that overlooked the street below. She watched a young mother pushing a stroller, a man walking his dog, 2 teenagers laughing at something on a phone screen. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, connected to each other in ways that seemed effortless and natural. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and wondered when she had stopped believing that such connection was possible for her. The walls she had built around her heart had not appeared overnight. They had been constructed slowly, brick by brick, over years of small betrayals and large disappointments. There was the gallery owner who had stolen her ideas and presented them as his own. There was the journalist who had written a devastating profile that twisted her words and made her seem cold and pretentious. And then there was Marcus, the man she had loved and trusted for 7 years, who had used her connections to advance his own career before leaving her for a younger artist he had met at one of her own exhibitions. After Marcus, Alexandra had made a decision. She would no longer allow anyone close enough to hurt her. She would be professional, courteous, even friendly when necessary. But she would never again make the mistake of letting someone see her fully, of revealing the soft and vulnerable parts of herself that could be wounded. It was safer this way. Lonelier, yes, but safe. Her phone buzzed on the table behind her, breaking the morning silence. She ignored it at first, assuming it was her assistant with some mundane scheduling question. But when it buzzed again, and then a third time, curiosity pulled her away from the window. She picked up the phone and saw 3 emails from an address she did not recognize. The subject line of the first email read simply, "A collaboration proposal." Alexandra almost deleted it without reading. She received dozens of such requests every month, most of them from people who wanted to use her name and reputation to elevate their own projects. She had learned to recognize these proposals instantly, to spot the subtle signs of self-interest hidden beneath flattering language. Her finger hovered over the delete button. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the unusual simplicity of the subject line, which contained no excessive praise or grand promises. Perhaps it was the strange energy of the morning, that feeling of shift and pause that still lingered in the air. Or perhaps it was simply that the hollowness inside her had grown so large that even a moment of curiosity felt like relief from the emptiness. She opened the email and began to read. The message was brief and surprisingly humble. It explained that the sender was working on a book of poetry, something personal that had grown out of years of private writing. He was looking for an artist to create visual accompaniments to the words, someone whose work explored the relationship between language and image. He had admired her paintings for many years. He understood if she was too busy or not interested. He simply wanted to ask. The email was signed with a name she recognized immediately, Keanu Reeves. Alexandra read the message 3 times, certain she must be misunderstanding something. Keanu Reeves, the actor, wanted to collaborate with her on a book of poetry. It seemed absurd, like something from a strange dream. She knew of him, of course, everyone knew of him. But she had never met him, never moved in the same circles, never had any connection to his world of films and fame. Her first instinct was suspicion. This was exactly the kind of celebrity vanity project she had learned to avoid. Famous people often wanted to associate themselves with serious artists, hoping that proximity to genuine creativity would make their own efforts seem more legitimate. She had been burned by such collaborations before, had watched her work become a mere backdrop for someone else's ego. She began composing a polite rejection in her mind. "Thank you for thinking of me. Unfortunately, my schedule does not permit. I wish you success with your project." But before she could type these words, something strange happened. A memory surfaced from deep within her mind, a memory she had not thought about in years. She was 26 years old, standing in a small gallery in New York, terrified and exhilarated because it was her very first exhibition. The paintings on the walls represented years of work, years of doubt, years of wondering if she had any talent at all. She had stood in the corner watching people walk past her art, desperately hoping someone would understand what she was trying to say. A man had stopped in front of her largest painting, the one that meant the most to her. He had stood there for nearly 20 minutes, not moving, not speaking, just looking. She had watched him from across the room, afraid to approach, afraid to break whatever spell the painting had cast. When he finally turned away, she saw that his eyes were wet. He had picked up one of the free exhibition pamphlets and slipped it into his jacket pocket before walking out into the night. She had never learned his name. She had never seen his face clearly. But she had never forgotten him, that stranger who had stood before her work and felt something real. Alexandra stared at the email on her phone screen. Keanu Reeves, a book of poetry, a collaboration. Against every instinct that had protected her for years, she typed 2 words and pressed send. "Tell me more." She did not know it yet, but that simple reply would change the entire direction of her life. It would crack open the walls she had built around her heart. It would lead her into the deepest fear and the greatest joy she had ever known. It would teach her that kindness is not weakness, that vulnerability is not danger, that being truly seen by another person is the most terrifying and beautiful gift we can receive. But all of that was still to come. For now, there was only a woman standing alone in her studio, wondering why she had just said yes to something she had spent years saying no to. Outside the window, the morning light continued to shift and change. The dust particles resumed their slow dance through the sunbeams, and somewhere across the city, a phone buzzed with a message that would set 2 broken hearts on a collision course with healing. Alexandra waited for a response with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Her studio felt different that afternoon. The shadows seemed softer, the colors on the walls deeper and more alive than they had been in months. She tried to return to her work, to pick up her brush and lose herself in the familiar rhythm of painting. But her mind kept returning to the email, to the quiet audacity of Keanu Reeves reaching out to her, and to the memory of that stranger in the New York gallery so long ago. Her assistant called to remind her of an upcoming meeting with her publisher, but Alexandra waved her off with a distracted hand. She needed a few more hours alone. She poured herself a cup of black coffee and sat on the edge of her work table, staring at the open message on her phone. When the reply came, it was just as simple as the first. It read, "Let's meet. I'll be in Lowe's Angels next week. If you're interested, we can talk at a cafe of your choosing." She read it again and again, each time feeling a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something she could not name. Hope, perhaps, or the fragile beginnings of trust. She spent the next few days preparing for the meeting. She researched Keanu Reeves beyond his movie roles. She read about his work with children's hospitals, about the foundation he had quietly built to support cancer research, about the way he walked anonymously through the world, always respectful, always humble. The more she read, the more she realized that the image the public saw was not a performance, but a reflection of who he truly was. It was not just inspiration. It was a reminder of what was possible even after loss. On the day of the meeting, Alexandra chose a small, out-of-the-way cafe near the edge of Silver Lake. It was a place she sometimes visited when she wanted to disappear. The tables were crowded with old books and the walls were covered in local artists' work. She arrived early and sat at a corner table by the window. The morning sun cast a golden rectangle on the tabletop. She ordered tea and let her thoughts drift. She watched people pass by outside. A father carrying his son on his shoulders, a couple holding hands and laughing. A woman walking a dog, the leash wrapped twice around her wrist as if she was in no hurry to go anywhere. These small scenes filled her with a quiet ache. She wanted to remember how to live like that again, without armor, without walls. When Keanu arrived, he looked just like he did in the movies, but also not at all. He wore faded jeans and a worn t-shirt. His hair was a little messy, his eyes deep and gentle. He carried himself with a calmness that seemed to lower the volume of the entire room. He nodded at her, not with the exaggerated politeness of someone meeting a famous artist, but with the easy respect of one human meeting another. "Hello," he said softly, taking the seat across from her. "Thank you for meeting me." She managed a small smile. "Thank you for reaching out." They sat in silence for a moment. It was not awkward. It was not forced. It was the kind of silence that allows two people to breathe together, to acknowledge the space between them without feeling the need to fill it immediately. Finally, he spoke. "I've admired your work for a long time. There's a quietness in it, a space that invites the viewer to slow down and listen. I think that's what I'm trying to do with my writing, to slow down and listen to the parts of myself that are usually hidden." Alexandra nodded, surprised by how much his words resonated. She found herself wanting to answer honestly. "I think we all have parts of ourselves that we keep hidden," she said. "Sometimes it feels safer that way. Sometimes it feels like the only way to survive." He looked at her with a gentle curiosity. "What changed for you?" he asked. "What brought you back to art, or did you ever really leave it?" She hesitated. The question was deeper than she expected. She thought about her answer for a moment. "I didn't leave," she said. "I just stopped believing that what I made mattered to anyone but me. I built walls to protect myself from disappointment, from betrayal, from feeling exposed." He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "I understand that. Loss can make you feel like you have to close yourself off to keep from being hurt again. But I've learned that sometimes the only way to heal is to let someone see the parts you're trying to protect." Alexandra looked down at her hands, noticing how her fingers twisted together nervously. She had not spoken these truths aloud in years. "Do you ever feel afraid?" she asked, almost whispering. He smiled faintly. "Every day," he said. "But fear doesn't have to decide for us. We can choose to move forward anyway." As they spoke, a strange sense of relief washed over her. It was not the relief of finally being understood, but something softer. The relief of being in the presence of someone who did not want anything from her except her honesty. Their conversation drifted from art to grief to the way the world changes after a loss that cannot be undone. Keanu shared stories from his own life with a humility that made Alexandra lean forward in her chair, forgetting about the cameras and the fame and the walls she had spent years building. When the time came to talk about the project, he was clear and simple. "I don't want this book to be about me," he said. "I want it to be about us, about the spaces between words, about the quiet moments that make up a life." Alexandra felt something inside her shift. For the first time in years, she sensed the possibility of collaboration, not as a transaction, but as a conversation between two people willing to be vulnerable. They agreed to begin with a series of meetings. They would share stories, poems, sketches. They would let the work grow naturally without pressure or expectation. As Keanu stood to leave, he paused by the door. "Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes," he said. and for letting me see the real you, even if you're still figuring that out yourself." Alexandra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not known for a very long time. "Thank you for seeing me too." Outside, the sun had moved across the sky. The cafe felt different now, as if the air itself had changed. Alexandra sat for a while longer, turning the conversation over in her mind, aware that something inside her had begun to crack open. She did not notice the man standing across the street, watching the cafe through the window. He wore a dark jacket and kept his face turned slightly away. His eyes, sharp and calculating, did not belong in this quiet moment of possibility. He watched Keanu and Alexandra for a long moment, then slipped a small envelope into his pocket and walked away. Alexandra had no idea that the gentle beginning of her collaboration had already attracted unwanted attention. She only knew that for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. A tiny, fragile flame that told her she might be able to trust again. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Alexandra had experienced in years. She and Keanu met regularly, sometimes at the small cafe in Silver Lake, sometimes at her studio, sometimes at quiet parks where they could walk and talk without interruption. Each meeting peeled back another layer of the walls she had built around herself. Each conversation revealed something new about the man behind the fame and something forgotten about the woman she used to be. Keanu shared his poetry with her slowly, one piece at a time, as if each poem was a small piece of his heart that he was entrusting to her care. The words were simple but profound, filled with grief and hope, and the quiet determination to keep moving forward even when the weight of loss threatened to pull him under. Alexandra found herself deeply moved by his vulnerability. Here was a man who had every reason to close himself off from the world, yet he chose again and again to remain open. She began creating sketches inspired by his poems. At first they were tentative, uncertain, as if her hand had forgotten how to translate emotion into image. But as the weeks passed, something shifted. Her lines became bolder. Her colors became richer. She started waking up before dawn, unable to sleep because her mind was buzzing with ideas she could not wait to capture on paper. For the first time in years, Alexandra felt alive. But alongside this growing joy, there was also a growing fear. The closer she allowed Keanu to come, the more terrified she became of losing everything she was building. She had been hurt before. She had trusted before. And each time the betrayal had left her more broken than the last. One evening, as she sat alone in her studio reviewing the day's work, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, assuming it was spam or a wrong number, but something made her open it anyway. The message contained only 2 words and a photograph. The words read, "Be careful." The photograph showed Alexandra and Keanu sitting together at the cafe, their heads bent close in conversation. It had been taken from across the street, through the window, without their knowledge. Someone had been watching them. Alexandra's heart began to race. She stared at the image, trying to understand what it meant and who could have sent it. Her first thought was that it was a paparazzi threat, someone trying to sell a story about the famous actor and the artist. But something about the message felt more personal, more targeted. She did not sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few weeks in her mind. Had she missed something? Had she been too trusting, too eager to believe that good things could happen without consequence? The next morning, she decided not to tell Keanu about the message. She told herself it was because she did not want to worry him, but deep down she knew the truth. She was afraid that if she spoke the fear aloud, it would become real, and she was not ready to lose the fragile hope she had only just begun to build. But the messages did not stop. Over the following days, more arrived. Each one contained a photograph of Alexandra and Keanu together, taken from different angles and different locations. Each one carried a subtle warning: be careful, watch your back, nothing lasts forever. Alexandra began to feel like she was being hunted. She started looking over her shoulder when she walked down the street. She jumped at unexpected sounds. She found herself pulling away from Keanu during their meetings, afraid that whoever was watching would see too much. Keanu noticed the change immediately. "You seem distant," he said one afternoon as they sat in her studio reviewing sketches. "Is everything okay?" Alexandra forced a smile. "I'm fine," she said, "just tired." But Keanu was not convinced. He set down the sketch he had been holding and looked at her with those gentle, searching eyes. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." For a moment, Alexandra wanted to confess everything. She wanted to show him the messages, to let him see the fear that had been growing inside her like a dark vine wrapping around her heart. But the words stuck in her throat. She had spent so many years protecting herself, hiding her vulnerabilities, pretending to be stronger than she felt. She did not know how to let go of that armor, even with someone who had shown her nothing but kindness. "I'm fine," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu did not push. He simply nodded and returned to the sketch, giving her the space she seemed to need. But Alexandra could see the concern in his eyes, and it broke something inside her. That night she received another message. This one was different. Instead of a photograph, it contained a document, an article from a small online publication dated 3 years earlier. The headline read, "Rising artist Marcus Chen credits mentor Alexandra Grant for early success." Alexandra's blood ran cold. Marcus, the name she had tried so hard to forget, the man who had used her, betrayed her, and left her more broken than she had ever been. She read the article with trembling hands. It was a puff piece, full of praise for Marcus and his brilliant career. But buried in the middle was a quote that made her stomach turn. "Alexandra taught me everything I know," Marcus had said, "but some people are meant to be stepping stones, not destinations." Stepping stones, that was how he saw her. Not as a person, not as an artist, not as the woman who had loved him and believed in him when no one else did. Just a stepping stone on his path to success. The final line of the message read, "He's not finished with you yet." Alexandra sat in the darkness of her studio, the phone clutched in her shaking hands. She understood now. The photographs, the warnings, the subtle threats. Marcus was behind all of it. He had heard about her collaboration with Keanu, about the new life she was building, and he could not stand to see her happy. He wanted to destroy what she was creating, just as he had destroyed her trust all those years ago. For a long moment, she considered giving up. She could end the collaboration, retreat behind her walls, return to the safe and empty life she had been living before Keanu's email arrived. It would be easier. It would be safer. She would survive. But then she thought about the poems Keanu had shared with her, about the grief he carried and the choice he made every day to keep his heart open, about the children he visited in hospitals, the strangers he treated with kindness, the quiet dignity with which he moved through a world that had given him every reason to become bitter and closed. She thought about the woman she used to be, the young artist who stood in that New York gallery 30 years ago, hoping desperately that someone would understand her work. She thought about the stranger who had stood before her painting and wept, who had carried a piece of her art in his pocket through years of darkness. And she made a decision. She would not let Marcus win. She would not let fear decide her future. She would tell Keanu everything, and together they would face whatever came next. She picked up her phone and typed a message. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you." The reply came almost instantly. "Of course, I'll be there." Alexandra set down her phone and looked around her studio. The sketches she had created over the past weeks hung on every wall, a testament to the hope she had rediscovered. She would not let that hope die, not without a fight. Outside her window, the city lights glittered like distant stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus was plotting his next move. But Alexandra was no longer the woman he had broken all those years ago. She was stronger now. She was braver, and she was no longer alone. Tomorrow, everything would change. She could feel it in her bones, in the quickening of her pulse, in the strange calm that had settled over her heart. Whatever happened next, she would face it with her eyes open and her walls down. For the first time in years, she was ready to be seen. The morning arrived with a softness that seemed almost deliberate. Pale light filtered through the curtains of Alexandra's bedroom, casting gentle shadows across the walls. She had barely slept, but she did not feel tired. Instead, she felt a strange clarity, as if the decision she had made the night before had washed away years of fog and confusion. Today she would tell Keanu everything. Today she would stop hiding. She dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt comfortable rather than impressive. She did not want armor today. She wanted to be herself, whoever that turned out to be. Keanu was already waiting when she arrived at the cafe. He sat at their usual table by the window, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him, his eyes watching the street with that quiet attentiveness she had come to recognize. When he saw her, he smiled, and something in her chest loosened. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down across from him. He nodded, his expression gentle but serious. "You sounded worried in your message. What's going on?" Alexandra took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind, but now that it was here, all her prepared words seemed to dissolve. So she simply began at the beginning. She told him about Marcus, about the 7 years they had spent together, the love she had given him, the trust she had placed in his hands. She told him about the betrayal, the way Marcus had used her connections to advance his own career, the cruel words he had spoken when he left her for someone younger and more useful to his ambitions. She told him about the walls she had built afterward, the decision she had made to never let anyone that close again. And then she told him about the messages. She showed him the photographs, the warnings, the article with Marcus's dismissive quote. She watched his face as he scrolled through the evidence, seeing the concern deepen in his eyes. When she finished, there was a long silence. Keanu set down her phone and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked softly. Alexandra felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I told you it would all fall apart. Afraid that you would see how broken I am and decide I wasn't worth the trouble." Keanu reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm and steady. "Alexandra," he said quietly, "being broken doesn't make you less valuable. It makes you human. We're all carrying wounds we don't show the world. The brave thing isn't pretending those wounds don't exist. The brave thing is letting someone see them anyway." She looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between his calm strength and her trembling fingers. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to trust again." "You don't have to know how," he said. "You just have to be willing to try. One moment at a time, one day at a time. That's all any of us can do." They sat together in silence for a while, the morning light growing stronger around them. Alexandra felt something shifting inside her, a loosening of the tight knots she had carried for so long. It was not resolution. It was not healing. But it was the beginning of something, a crack in the wall, a door opening onto a room she had kept locked for years. Finally, Keanu spoke again. "What do you want to do about Marcus?" Alexandra considered the question. A part of her wanted revenge. A part of her wanted to expose him, to make him pay for the pain he had caused. But as she sat there, holding Keanu's hand, she realized that revenge would only keep her trapped in the past. It would give Marcus power over her present and her future. It would make her smaller, not larger. "I want to let him go," she said slowly. "Not for his sake, for mine. I don't want to carry him with me anymore." Keanu nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "That's the bravest choice you could make." "But I do want to face him," Alexandra continued. "I want him to know that he didn't break me, that I'm still here, still creating, still capable of connection and joy. I want him to see that his cruelty didn't win." "Then let's do that," Keanu said simply. "Together." 2 days later, Alexandra stood outside a gallery in downtown Los Angeles. Marcus was inside, attending the opening of his latest exhibition. She had not seen him in 3 years. The thought of facing him made her stomach clench with anxiety. But Keanu stood beside her, steady and calm, and she drew strength from his presence. They walked into the gallery together. The space was crowded with well-dressed strangers, champagne glasses glinting in the light, voices murmuring in appreciation of the art on the walls. Alexandra scanned the room until she found him. Marcus stood near the center of the gallery, surrounded by admirers, his smile as charming and practiced as she remembered. When he saw her, his expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then a smooth mask of friendliness that did not reach his eyes. "Alexandra," he said, walking toward her with his arms spread wide. "What a wonderful surprise. I didn't expect to see you here." Alexandra did not return his embrace. She stood her ground, her spine straight, her voice steady. "I received your messages, Marcus." His smile faltered for just a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," she said calmly. "The photographs, the warnings, the article you made sure I would see. You wanted me to be afraid. You wanted me to run and hide like I did before." Marcus's eyes darted to Keanu, then back to Alexandra. His charm was beginning to crack, revealing something harder and colder beneath. "And what if I did?" he said quietly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "You were always too soft, Alexandra, too trusting. Someone needed to remind you how the world really works." Alexandra felt the old fear rise up inside her, the familiar urge to retreat and protect herself. But then she thought about everything she had learned over the past weeks, about Keanu's quiet courage, about the poems that spoke of grief transformed into hope, about the choice to remain open even when closing off would be so much easier. She took a breath and let the fear pass through her like wind through an open window. "You're wrong, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and strong. "The world works the way we choose to make it work. You chose cruelty, you chose manipulation, you chose to see other people as stepping stones for your own ambition. But that's not strength, that's weakness. Real strength is kindness. Real strength is the courage to be vulnerable. Real strength is building people up instead of tearing them down." Marcus stared at her, his face reddening. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed. "No," Alexandra said softly. "I think I'm different from you, and I'm grateful for that difference every single day." She turned and walked away, not waiting for his response. Keanu fell into step beside her, and together they left the gallery, stepping out into the cool night air. They walked in silence for a while, the city sounds washing over them like music. Finally, Keanu spoke. "How do you feel?" Alexandra considered the question. She felt lighter, as if she had set down a burden she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten it was there. She felt sad, too, for the years she had lost to fear and isolation. But mostly she felt hope, a quiet, steady hope that glowed in her chest like a small flame. "I feel free," she said. 6 months later, Alexandra stood in a gallery of her own. The walls were covered with her most personal work yet, a series of paintings and sketches inspired by her collaboration with Keanu. The exhibition was called Scene, and it explored the courage required to let another person truly witness you. Keanu attended the opening, standing quietly in the back as visitors moved through the space. Reporters asked about their relationship, about the book they had created together, about the rumors and speculation that had followed them for months. Alexandra answered each question with the same simple truth. "He taught me that kindness is not weakness. He taught me that being seen by the right person doesn't diminish you. It reminds you how much of yourself you had forgotten existed." Later that night, after the crowds had gone and the gallery was quiet, Alexandra and Keanu sat on the rooftop of her studio, looking out at the city lights. The air was cool and clear. The stars were faint but visible. "Thank you," Alexandra said softly, "for everything." Keanu smiled, that quiet, gentle smile that she had come to treasure. "You did the hard work yourself," he said. "I just reminded you that you were worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other after swimming through separate oceans of grief. Two people who had chosen vulnerability over armor, connection over isolation, hope over fear. Alexandra thought about everything she had learned. She thought about the power of kindness, how it could heal wounds that seemed unhealable. She thought about the importance of respect for oneself and for others. She thought about resilience, the ability to keep moving forward even when the path seemed impossible. And she thought about humility, the recognition that we are all broken in some way, and that our brokenness is not something to hide but something to share. She thought about Keanu's words from their very first conversation. Grief changes shape, but it never ends. But she understood now that grief was not the only thing that changed shape. Hope changed shape too. Love changed shape. We ourselves changed shape, growing and evolving with each experience, each loss, each moment of connection. The moment Keanu Reeves changed Alexandra Grant's perspective forever was not a single dramatic event. It was a series of small choices, small kindnesses, small acts of courage that accumulated over time. It was the decision to send an email to a stranger. It was the willingness to share poetry that revealed the deepest parts of oneself. It was the patience to wait while someone learned to trust again. And in the end, it was the simple truth that we are never truly alone. That there are people in this world who will see us, really see us, if we are brave enough to let them. Ending reflection, the lessons of this story. As we come to the end of this journey, I want to take a moment to reflect on what Alexandra and Keanu have taught us. Their story is not just about two people finding each other. It is about the universal human struggle to balance self-protection with the need for connection. The first lesson is that kindness is revolutionary. In a world that often rewards aggression and self-interest, choosing to be gentle is an act of courage. Keanu showed Alexandra that kindness is not naivety. It is strength expressed through compassion. The second lesson is that vulnerability is not weakness. Alexandra spent years building walls to protect herself from pain. But those walls also kept out joy, connection, and love. It was only when she allowed herself to be seen, truly seen, that she began to heal. The third lesson is that we cannot control what others do to us, but we can control how we respond. Marcus tried to destroy Alexandra's happiness, but she refused to let his cruelty define her. She chose to let go of anger and resentment, not because Marcus deserved forgiveness, but because she deserved peace. The fourth lesson is that healing is not a destination. It is a journey. Alexandra did not wake up one day and find herself completely healed. She took small steps, made small choices, and gradually built a new life. Healing happens one moment at a time, one day at a time. And the fifth lesson is perhaps the most important of all. We are never truly alone. Even in our darkest moments, there are people who care about us, people who want to help us, people who will see us if we let them. The key is having the courage to reach out, to ask for help, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Keanu Reeves has lived a life marked by extraordinary loss, but he has also lived a life marked by extraordinary kindness. He has shown us that it is possible to carry our wounds and still choose to be soft in a world that often rewards hardness. He has shown us that grief does not have to make us bitter. It can make us deeper, more compassionate, more fully human. And Alexandra Grant has shown us that it is never too late to start again. No matter how many walls we have built, no matter how many years we have spent hiding, we can always choose to step into the light. We can always choose connection over isolation, hope over fear, love over loneliness. This is the moment that changed everything. Not a single dramatic event, but a series of small choices, small kindnesses, small acts of courage. And it is available to all of us every single day. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope Alexandra and Keanu's story has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched mine. Remember that kindness matters, respect matters, vulnerability matters, and you matter exactly as you are with all your wounds and all your light. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and with others. The world needs more kindness, and it starts with each one of us.